One? Not yet. And that's why we did the laughter sound.
It says, Ariana, this the broadcast was deleted on Facebook.
Oh, no.
Or just remove the destination broadcast.
Try creating a broadcast and we're smooth. You can go live and we can just do it.
Destination, Facebook. That looks good.
Excuse us with our technical difficulties.
It was looking good earlier today.
So this is the first community class that our integrated family medicine bachelor is doing since before the pandemic. We used to do this every month as a community offering. Pretty good.
I would do it again.
Okay. And we're trying some new tech out to kind of, be with the times. And it's the first time. So it's a learning experience.
I love it.
Yeah. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ariana, and I'm the health coach for Integrated Family Medicine at Asheville. And we are so excited to be restarting our monthly class series that we want to give out as an offering to our community at large. And we are very grateful to be in this beautiful space here at Wrongways River Lodge, and especially grateful to have these two beautiful experts here to learn from. And so I want to introduce them. We have Beth Hockman and Kriya Lendzion. And Beth is a parent coach, an educator, facilitator, TEDx speaker, and homeschool mom. She has been in the experiential education field for over 28 years. She has a bachelor's in social psychology and a master's in experiential education from Minnesota State University. And she has worked for various adventure education programs, including 18 years with Outward Bound in both the US and Africa. She is one of the founders of Asheville Task, the American Adventure Service Corps, a youth-based nonprofit that combines the power of wilderness leadership and service learning into value-forming experiences for young people. She has worked as both a high school teacher and as an academic director. And Kriya Lendzion has journeyed from her own years as a teen in high conflict with her parents to becoming one of the nation's leading youth addiction and prevention specialists. She has been a school counselor, an adolescent therapist, a drug and alcohol educator for over 2 decades, and as a parent coach, speaker, and author. Kriya empowers adults to be teen whisperers with the youth in their lives in order to help addiction-proof them for our increasingly risky and addictive world. Humorously known as the drug lady in our community, she regularly conducts drug and addiction education at several schools across Buncombe County and provides parent and family coaching, consulting, and trainings across the country. Kriya is currently the middle school counselor at Rainbow Community School and the French Broad River Academy for Girls. So I want to say thank you both so much for being here this evening. Our topic is relevant and big. Teen screens and drugs, what to know and how to start the conversation. And so just to kind of dive right in, the first question we'd love to ask you both to begin discussing is, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen both an increase in screen use and drug use. Do you see a connection between those? What is that like, do you think?
Do you want to take that first?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like I could talk about this one alone for 30 minutes. But the obvious connections of like, okay, so kids are online more and they are swimming in pro-use messages that are from memes to YouTube series to, all the things that they can stream, and then that drug dealers, drug dealers have learned to use social media. And as you hear, like Snapchat is one of the top places to kind of find a dealer these days. So there's a connection to drugs, that's happening through all things screen. But then there's just sort of this general like addictiveness that's interweaving, where screens are, I believe, making kids more kind of priming the pathway for addiction in general to all the things, including substances. Because you think about being pumped with anything that is dopaminergic, right? That bursts dopamine, which screens have been shown to do, the same way that food and sex and drugs and, gambling all do as well, right? And if you slam the brain with something dopaminergic like that, a couple things happen. One is that when you think about riding a roller coaster, right? When you ride a roller coaster and it's like, whoa, and all the things pop off. And then if you ride the same roller coaster over and over and over again, it loses its kind of oomph, right? And the other thing, so that if you also want to go on a slower, less loopy roller coaster, it's going to be really boring. right? And so what happens when somebody is slamming themselves with all that dopamine popping, things start to get boring. If they're not amped up and they're like super, dopamine blasting, and there also becomes the need to like, oh, well, now I need to, it's almost a tolerance develop. So I got to kick it up a notch or twist, just figure out like up it in some kind of way, or switch over to something else. So I think we're just seeing the addictive pathways being primed by technology, in ways that I assume that, I predict that is crossing over because of all the research on screens. We've got a study now that's a few years in. It's the first longitudinal study that they've ever done on kids and phones. And what we're seeing is a decrease in the ability to delay gratification, to control impulses, to self-entertain, to self-soothe, to tolerate distress, right? That is the recipe for addiction. Mm-hmm. So I think they're absolutely interwoven.
Interconnected and intertwined, it sounds like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I love it. For those of you that know me, I get into the brain science because I'm like, we're raising the first generation where we have the brain science, so we should use that. Mm-hmm. And so recently, actually just on Thursday, research out of Stanford University was published on the effect of the pandemic on teen brains. Mm-hmm. And I love when this happens in research. The researchers were doing a longitudinal study in looking at gender differences with depression in adolescents. Mm-hmm. And so they had been taking these MRI scans every 2 years, and they took their last set, and then like a week later, we all shut down. Ooh. So then when they reopened, they said, well, what can we do with this information? So they did the MRI scans again. And what they found in the brains of these adolescents is that there was an increase in mass in the amygdala, which is our stress response. So for folks that have more robust amygdala, they're often going to respond with a stress response, and then a thinning of the cortical, so the cortex. And that's where the executive function lives, which are some pretty important skills when dealing with screens and drugs, impulse control, and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so what they discovered is that the pandemic for teenagers matches the ACE study out of Emory University, which is the Adverse Childhood Experience. And what we know from that ACE study is that when we see these shifts in the brain, they are more vulnerable to depression, mm-hmm. anxiety, and addiction. Mm-hmm. So I think what we need as adults is to recognize what the pandemic was for our adolescents, and in particular their brain, and work from that base.
The impact that the pandemic and the stressors and the isolation that the pandemic specifically had, the way that affected teens was, neurological. Mm-hmm. We can see that. Mm-hmm. So considering the fact that during the pandemic, screens also were a huge means of connection and of schooling, and now screens are in schools, and it's difficult to even ask my next question, which is, what would healthy screen time look like? And so I think it's almost maybe better to ask, what amount of not screen time do you think teens need to kind of have a healthy balance? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think, that's, in my opinion, as someone that loves the outdoors and has 2 tweens, my opinion is no screens. Yeah. You got it. It's called the mountains. Yeah. But recognizing that it is here. And so how do we manage that? And they break, like when you look at it, they break it down to, there's the educational, there's the passive, and then there's the interactive, right? Like my girls love the app when they're out camping and looking up stuff. I'm like, oh, that's such and such tree. And, Emma the Border Collie is coming up as a skunk. This is so interesting, right? That's when you're like, technology is awesome. Look at you using that. Mm-hmm. And so I think the important thing is, right, when we're looking at technology with our kids, we need to have that lens of mentor, not monitor. Mm-hmm. And too often that's where we're coming from, just culturally, and then it feels good to us because it feels like control. But we need to be less referee and more coach. And so when you're looking at those different types of screen and what is too much, it's gonna depend on each family and each kid, but asking the questions and being curious and saying, well, I know that one of your goals was to learn guitar or was to do this. What is the role of technology playing in you achieving that? Are you getting there? Are you not? And really asking those powerful questions to help them start to develop, because they're going to go off. And if we aren't developing that in them, they're going to go to college and it's going to be a hot mess with the screens. So for me, the way I explain it to my girls, and I know you have so much for older, so I'm looking forward to hearing that. But for the younger ones, my girls are 12. I explain it like food, because health is a value in our family. We talk a ton about health. So I'll say some screen time is like eating a really great salad, and some screen time is like a plate of brownies. And every now and then we do like brownies in our family, right? And so asking yourself, what is this screen time? What is it? Is it a salad or is it a brownie? And if it is a brownie, how do we manage just having one of them? And that worked for my girls in that age. For older kids.
Yeah, I mean, the research from several years ago showed that kids that were on screens for 5 or more hours had 70% more suicidal ideation and actions than kids that were on for 1 hour.
Can you repeat that, please? Because that's a big statistic.
Per day.
So 50
per day. So kids that were on for 5 or more hours had 70% more. Let me make sure I get this right so I don't quote it wrong. Had 70% more likely to have suicidal thoughts and actions than those with 1 hour of use. So it really there's a parallel, between those. So I think just keep that in mind. We know that more time, we know that more time is paralleled with higher rates of mental, with anxiety, depression, with eating disorders, with substance use. And so we know we want to, try to reel that back. But I love what you said, Beth, just applies to the older kids too. I mean, it's the same. I love that metaphor of the, of the diet, right? Is that it's about, when I think about phone, all things kind of phone management, I think of like clock, context, and content. Those are kind of the 3 areas. And so, the clock is about like, when are you using? Are you using it right before bed? How much time are you using? Context being like what you're talking about is like, how is it being used and when? Right? What's the purpose of it? Is it just it's always there and it's just like another limb that if you don't have it, you're like, who am I? What's going on? Where like that was my kid. I would take his phone. He's like running into walls. Like, what do I do now? So is it? I know. I just saw the looks. The couples looked at each other now. But they're like, yeah, that. But yeah, because it can be used. It's about like, is it being a tool? And can it be a treat sometimes? Totally. You'd be like, I'm just going to play this mindless game for no reason at all. Yeah. But if it becomes the tool for confidence, coping, fun, or connection, the one tool, the thing that works better than anything a kid has, then it's you're headed for a dependency. Yeah. Right. And so I think looking at like making sure that there's 100 other things to do, that your kid has some effective and what's the word I'm trying to say? A tool. They can acquire it fast. What's that word? Accessible. Okay. That it's effective, and it's accessible to them. Ways to meet those needs in other ways. But also, like, can they use? My kid used his screens to make music and to what turned into his career as a filmmaker. Wow. Which is awesome. But he would also get super sucked into gaming when he was supposed to be doing homework, and whenever he was uncomfortable and he was trying to avoid something, it would be his emotional, escape. And so I think it's really about like the how and the why. Yeah. Is more important. It is really important. But then there's that other piece that we have to be like, our kid can be on 1 hour a day, and they can be watching porn. Or being exposed or watching Snoop smoke up with all the celebrities in high school and like all of his best friends,
point
and
being
your high schoolers watching this, like,
it can be
Right.
either like an unhealthy or not really meeting
Right.
their needs in that 1 hour, or it could be something more nourishing.
and right, and
Which-
there's creative things
Yeah.
to do, and there's things to learn on it, and there's ways. Like I also have seen kids connect that are queer, that are on the spectrum, that are that have trouble with social skills and connections in other ways, and they're finding these community, and they're finding inspiration, and they're finding kids that are watching TikTok dance videos and funny like cat videos when they're in a bad mood, and it's a healthy coping tool more than it is for them to be cutting, or to be using or to be vaping. But it's all about the balance.
Salad
of
or a brownie.
it. Salad or a brownie.
Which-
So
what I
That's
love about these
great.
analogies is that I feel like regardless of opinions about it, screens are now a part of our lives.
Right.
It's now a part of what we're all being exposed to, what we're all using on a daily basis for academics, for career, for fun, for connection, for adults, for teens, for kids. So how can we pull back and look at the wholeness of that picture and say,
Yeah.
okay, what's ultimately nourishing, and respect the agency of our teens and our kids, and really
That's
appeal
huge.
to that
right.
and honor it and lead that way.
Well, and that's huge. So I think when you're talking about reeling, because there's a difference between you setting up the foundation. And so this is the norm of our family. This is what we're all doing. By the way, if you're going to set a norm for the family, I encourage you to follow that too. Our phones go in the dock at 10 o'clock at night. We're only doing this for so often, and we're not at the table, and we're not, but that it's very different to set that up than to have your kid be 16 and be like, okay, now we got to figure out this isn't working. And you're just sort of starting and learning that you have to reel it back. That's kind of what the pandemic is like, is that we had to sort of change those lines and boundaries way beyond what a lot of us normally had and felt were healthy for the time. And now it's like, okay, so reeling it back is difficult, but you just nailed something, I think, with the teens in particular, is involving them with all the things. We want to involve them in the conversations by the time they're a teenager, and if you're going to do things to them or for them, you do them with them. Your kids tell me that all the time. Like, so it's, lay that out of saying what we just talked about. Here's what we know about this. Here's my concerns about this. Here's what I've seen you lose from my perspective. Or ask the question first before we say what we've seen. What do you think you've lost during this time, or that's changed for you during this time that you've been on screens more? How does that feel in your body differently? How does that fit, and get them to sort of guide, hey, let's reel back to something different so that we can, feel different.
Yeah. How is this serving you? Or how is it controlling you, maybe?
Because I've never had a kid that didn't have, when they had a technology break, even though they might kick and scream like a heroin addict, coming off their stuff,
Yep.
they pull the phone away. I've never had one say, I'm really, like they always say, it feels really good. A few days later, or I'm relieved, or I discovered art again, or, all the things.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too that is the adults and the lives, not only for our kids, but for us, is we often start with technology. What is technology doing to you? Technology is distracting you and all of that. But instead, if we come at it with the question of what's going on for you and what's the role of technology in that, we open a line of conversation and communication that's collaborative and kind of like we're on the same team. And I want to explore what's going on for you. I notice that you're more depressed, you're more withdrawn. What do we think the role of technology is in that? And starting from that piece first versus Instagram is making you depressed and TikTok sucking you in and all of this, but like what's going on for you? And it can be anything from, I know you had this goal of, let's say, sports, and sleep was important, and you're doing your sports, sleep deprived, and we're seeing it in the performance.
Yeah.
That's what's going on for you. And then asking, what's technology's role in that? Can also help guide as they're
100%.
figuring out the brownie and the salad.
Yeah. Because I'm just here to help you reach your goals. Like I'm here to partner with you and support you on that.
As a coach with another, I'm hearing that's really the coaching approach, as opposed to coming in with judgment or with a targeted question of, do you think this is the right thing for you to be doing? With that tone of voice, coming in with an open-ended question, and that doesn't back your kid into a corner.
Oh, just sarcasm. That's the best.
Or, yeah.
They love that. Oh, this is really working for you.
It's really great at healthy
Yeah.
relationships.
You're in a great mood in the morning after you've been on the phone forever.
So
Keep doing that.
just to segue from this into the next question. Oh,
Excuse me.
yeah, no. Thank you for being here. Even
Yeah.
though 2 weeks of recovery.
Yeah.
You're still. So during the pandemic, screens were, I think, more like salad for all of us because that was our best means to connect in many cases. And now that is not necessarily true, but we've got kids and adults who are still in the habit of using screens the way we did then. How can we roll that excessive pandemic era screen time back to a healthier normal now?
Yeah.
I think it's a conversation. Well, I think it's like I said before, is you ask questions first. Just ask, just echoing what Beth said, is like, how do you feel like how does this feel to you now?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we needed it then, but I know this, and you can always be like, well, this is what it feels like to me. How about you? Like I'm feeling kind of out of bounds. Like I don't need this way anymore. And now I feel like I've kind of gotten used to it, but it doesn't feel good to me when I'm doing this, like I'm not doing these other things that used to be really fulfilling to me. And now there's access to them. And I'm kind of like, not quite sure how to switch gears. How about you? Like, do you feel similar? Like
Handing it
I think asking the questions.
asking the questions.
Yeah, and there's a new book that came out in August called Screenwise. I don't know if anyone's seen it. And it's Harvard researchers from Project Zero from the School of Education. And the reason why I love this book is they did it in collaboration with teens. So they came to the teens and they said, what do you want your parents to know about screens? And I love it so much. It's just full of so many good nuggets, right? Because again, we're on the same team. Like we want the best for our kid. And so we need to keep that in mind, that it's not this us and which it can feel like that. Like I acknowledge it can feel like that a lot because there's that addiction piece to it. But one of the hopeful things out of that book that they discovered is that kids do want our help regarding managing screens. They do want our help. And so one of the first things we need to start with is seeing it from their viewpoint. And so we need to be curious and interested, even if I don't care about video games or whatever the TikTok thing is. Like we need to be curious and say, tell me about that. Why is this app so interesting to you? Why is this game? Why does it have a pull on you? No, we do it without being judgmental. Why are you addicted to this? It's more of like, tell me I'm interested in this game. And so we need to start from that big picture, that teen view, and be curious and ask them. And then once we start learning that, we will get a trove of information. We will be connected with our kids. And then we can start this process of helping them develop healthy habits around it. Like the digital native, it's here to stay. So how can we help them develop the healthy habits around it? And one of the things in the book I found so fascinating is they talked about this phenomenon that they had never even thought of, that in particular the girls were sharing with them, and they labeled it the burden of accessibility. And so it's this idea for all adolescents, but in particular girls, that they want to be a good friend. And that's important. And they want to be empathetic, and that's important. And now their friends have 24/7 access to them. And I don't know about you growing up, but sometimes I was like, school's done. I'm done. Like this little empath is going home. But I can't imagine as an empath going home and then being like, oh my God, 24/7 access
All my
to
friends
all my
need
friends.
me. I know.
Yeah, all my friends need me, and I need to do this, and this. And so I think by helping our kids recognize that and be creative in our solutions and say, I totally, acknowledging is so powerful for them, and saying, I see that you want to be a good friend. And I think that is amazing. Is there a way that you can be accessible for your friend that allows you to also have boundaries? Could we maybe turn off the notification beeps and let your friend know if she needs to contact you? It's a phone call, right? So think like creative in how we can do that for them is also, because we don't want to be black or white. That's not our world. And it's definitely not our world with screens. So how can we have that creative process, which does mean that conversation with them? And I think also just acknowledging, that's an I statement. I'm 54. I have no idea what it's like to be an adolescent in this screen landscape. So acknowledging like, that must be a lot. I remember what it was like in middle school to walk into the lunch cafeteria and be like, oh my God, where am I going to sit? Because I like that friend group and that friend group, but they don't like each other. And that was just lunch in the cafeteria. And our kids have that all the time with their screens, right? Like, oh, do I like this? But then they might see, and then they're not going to like that. So if we can kind of remember what that felt like in that middle school cafeteria, our kids are bombarded with that all the time with the social media. So I think acknowledging that with them can also be really powerful.
Yeah, huge. I just want to build on that for a second. Is that piece of, and the validation is huge first, and, and acknowledge it, because we tend as parents to be like, well, I was your age once, like we think we know all the things. We have no idea what it's like to be a teenager in 2022. We don't. And so all we can do is let them school us on that. And having that curiosity and asking those questions, right? Like I used to slam Snapchat just because my parent fear was this self-destructs in 24 hours. Hell to the no. Because all the things that can happen with that, all the drugs and the drug deals and the predators and the bullying and the sexting. And that's like, nope, hard no. And then from my clients, as I'm coaching, they're like, well, this is what's really cool about this. And this is how we all communicate. And so if I'm not on this, I'm left out. For one, but there's all these fun things and all the filters and all the, and I let them teach me on it. I was like, oh, I get it. Like, I can see why this is fun. So then there's the and, like you were saying, like, so you put the almighty and in there. Don't ever put your big old butt in there. Don't butt it, because it erases the whole first half of the sentence. You can't validate and be like, but I know what's up. Right. No. So you validate and say, like, I understand why you feel this way. But here's I just did it. Right? It's such a habit. And here's my fear, and here's what I'm hearing about this and why I'm concerned about it. And then, when you're talking about, the thing with teenagers, it's really important, whether we're talking drugs or screens, is, I don't know if there's, I know we've got some clinicians and other people in the room, but if you know about motivational interviewing, there's this beautiful thing called, you ask permission. So as simple as it is with a teenager to just say, like, well, I did deal with this once, or I've got some ideas, you want to hear them. And then saying, like, what if we turn the notifications off? What would that work for you or not? What else can we brainstorm? But you ask permission to do it first, because otherwise it's this really subtle thing that for teenagers, otherwise is like condescending and disempowering and kind of disrespectful to them, to just sort of immediately move into problem solving and drop your wisdom, no matter how awesome it is. Right.
Yeah. And to follow up with that point too, is we're really great as the adults giving the lecture of the risks. Your digital footprint is a tattoo for life.
Right.
Your employers are going to look it up. And that's all true. But if we're just dropping the risk without supporting them on how they draw the boundaries, it's not going to land, and it is miseducative. Yep. It's not helpful for them. Yep. So it's okay to share the risks because they do exist, but then we need to take that step further and say, yeah, this is how you draw boundaries with your friends. This is how, right? It's just like that parent saying, don't drink at the party, don't drink. But then we don't give them any language, right? We need to role play that. This is what it looks like. I'm going to be the friend that's going to
Don't role play with your teenager. We'll talk about that later.
My girls are 12 and they love role playing. I've actually even role played the boyfriend that wants a little too much. That was a good role play.
Please record that for my
I feel like they're on that. So just watch out. Whoever's going to date Zoe and Quinn.
And I feel like
we have the language around that.
I feel like this is where the different age groups, you can approach it differently. Like my 6-year-old son, how I'm able to approach conversations around screen time with him is obviously not going to work when he's 16. So I'm in training right now because I have no idea what it's going to be like. But what I hear you saying is, 1, don't assume we know what they're going through. 2, acknowledge that they have a lot to teach us about what it's like to be a teenager right now that we can't possibly already know. Ask questions and come at it, I guess, again, very carefully without judgment.
And humbly.
Yeah, be curious.
Yeah. I remember when I was going through my coaching training, there was an exercise we did where they had us write down a color, a piece of furniture, et cetera. And then afterwards, we all talked about what we wrote down. Most people wrote down red or blue. It's like, okay, great. I wrote down blue, you wrote down blue. But is it the same blue? No. Have you been 16? Have I been 16? Yes. Was it the same? No. And I think that even just remembering that can be a really powerful grounding tool mentally as we approach them.
Yeah.
And so just like we don't know what it was like or what it's like now in terms of screens, we also don't know what it's like in terms of drugs. So Kriya, this is more directed at you in the beginning. What are our kids being exposed to right now? And what are their risks?
Okay, everybody take a deep breath. This is the part that gets scary. I know screens are scary too. Yeah, so I think, the things that are out there right now. So we have to keep in mind as, it's because we often think we know all the things, even those of us that were like, been there, done that, in college or high school, is that what is going on now from caffeine to alcohol to cannabis, like all of the things are these hulkified versions of what we grew up with, and so they are, they can get 5 shots of espresso worth in a bubbly, awful tasting beverage that they somehow seem to like anyway. And same with cocktails, right? They're coming in every form. Everything is super strong and it's in these cans and bottles and it looks all fun, and vaping, all the things, right? So, I think vaping for one, cannabis, is huge. And I know that, probably some people in this room have already dealt with this, but that, knowing that everything is super concentrated. So, when our kids are vaping something, for one, it is going to the brain really quickly, like anything that you ingest, because the lungs are really absorbent. So you smoke something, it goes to the brain quickly. But vaping is a little bit more, it's more addictive and it's more inebriating. They can get out of control easier because it's more highly concentrated. Right? You're not losing the stuff in the smoke. But what they're vaping often is it's a concentrate, right? It's a liquid concentrate. It's a dab wax, as they call it, or butter, or shatter, but it's usually, they call it dab or wax. But it's a concentrate. And so if the herbal marijuana, the plant, the old school plant, is still like 25% THC, right? Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. When in the 80s, it was about 8%. In the 70s, it was 1 to 2, and now it's about 20, 25. What our kids are getting their hands on. And so that's up in its potency. And that THC is the psychoactive substance, right? It also stunts the growth of the adolescent brain, the prefrontal cortex, all that part that's all about big picture thinking, emotional control, planning and organizing, your thoughts, all of that, right? So the concentrates are 50 on the low end to 90+% THC. So when our kids, and they are starting with that, they're starting with vaping, with dabbing and with the liquids. And we have absolutely no research on what slamming a growing adolescent brain with that is doing. And there's some theories, right, that it's probably not going to look good. That it's probably doing some long-term damage easily and quickly, the way that binge drinking does during adolescence. Wow. Right. So that's one of the main concerns and one of the big trends. Now, the good news is that drug use is actually, we saw it go while there was some up during it went down. 2019 went up. 2021, the data looks like all the things are actually going down. But what's on the rise is that there's been 114% increase in fatal overdoses for 14 to 18-year-olds in the last 2 years. So fatal overdoses are skyrocketing, even though use is going down. Because the other thing that we have to know and be talking about is fentanyl.
Nice question.
And the fentanyl, and this community has been a hotbed, for this. And I'm going to try to not get teary because I have lost 5 kids that I was close to. Just at my little charter school that I was at for 13 years, we lost 3 in a year and a half. These are well-supported, loved kids. And it took, the last one, it was 1 Xanax that he scored from a friend because he was feeling anxious, didn't have his own prescription, got it from a friend of a friend of a friend, and didn't wake up because it had fentanyl in it, and died at 19. So these are happening in our community. We lost another kid in North Buncombe last month. So overdoses are happening in the school bathrooms. They're not trying not to publicize it, but I don't know one of the schools nearby that hasn't had a emergency room incident in the last year. Happened during the school day. So, and this is with vapes, opioids finding their way into vapes. The last one that I heard
Causing overdoses from the vapes.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what drugs are our kids being exposed to? Really intense concentrated THC.
THC.
Through vaping.
And then, so the pill, what's happening with the fentanyl is it's getting into, other than anything that's powdery, but what we've had a rise in is these counterfeit pills. So they look you can go online. I mean, I scare the hell out of people in my presentations by saying, okay, imagine I have $300 here. I'm going to go online, and in 15 minutes, I can buy a pill press. I can buy the fillers. I can buy the molds that look like a Xanax or a Percocet or a Oxycontin that they look exactly like it. And somebody can do that in their basement if they want, but they're coming in kind of mass production now, from outside and inside the country, so they can look just like it. And so if kids are just being passed stuff, if they don't see it come out of the actual bottle, a lot of those prescriptions can be made counterfeit. And we've had celebrities, that died and overdosed from fentanyl. Tom Petty, Prince. The money doesn't matter, and then a lot of these kids, they're kids that are the star lacrosse player on the team. It's not just those kids, because now it can get into anything.
All kids are at risk.
Yes, all kids are at risk.
Okay.
So it has become this thing that every kid needs to have, like your high schoolers need to have Narcan, 2 things. Narcan on them in their purse, in their car, and it loses its potency in the car, but it's better to have it than not have it. And you can get the nasal, with insurance, you should be able to walk into the pharmacy and get it, cheap to free. And there's some, if you want to reach out to me, I can tell you where to get it in the community for free too, if you need to, but just a nasal, so somebody can be at a party, and if something's going down, it's just squirting up the nose to reverse naloxone or Narcan can reverse an opioid overdose. And the other thing is fentanyl test strips. Mm-hmm. It's become something every kid needs, that, as long as you can liquefy a substance to some point, so they can scrape off some of the pill and put it in water and put the fentanyl test strip in to see if it's present. I mean, the problem with that is it's a little bit of a false confidence, it's like a chocolate chip cookie, right? Like the fentanyl can still be in a supply of something, without it being in every single little, but it's better to test it than not test it.
So where we're seeing risk is imitation prescription drugs.
Mm-hmm.
For fentanyl,
Mm-hmm.
and overdoses happening in our community, and that's
Mm-hmm.
happening actively right now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
how, and this is for both of you
And
now to back up,
Yeah.
how can we talk to our kids effectively? Because you don't, as we were talking about this
Mm-hmm.
earlier, coming at them with the risks of, we don't want you to die.
Right.
And we also don't want you to do these drugs.
Yeah.
Is not always the most
It's
effective.
part of it.
So how do you
Yeah.
approach it
Yeah.
effectively?
So I think, for one, the risks is part of it. I mean, it isn't, because it's all about inner compass, right? Like we need to help them develop an inner compass, because we have less and less control over what they're doing. And they can even say, there's a back door to the movie theater too. We can think we know where they are. So says this ex-delinquent teen, there's the window to the bedroom opens, so ultimately, it's all about, it's about them being able to steer themselves through all of this stuff and navigate it themselves, right? But they have to have inner compass and sort of buy into that. And similar to what Beth was saying about technology, right? So part of that is helping them examine, like, how does this? So I know so here are the risks, here's the information, the drug ed. It is important. The scary stories are important, especially when it's a kid like them, like this, when I tell kids, and I tear up as I show a picture of, this is somebody I love that took a Xanax and died. That's it. That is impactful, but you can't just lead with scare tactics. It can't be the only tool in your toolbox, right? So you pair that with sort of that values, almost like you're tuning into their values, or you're reflecting back to them. Okay, so how does would this fit, or does this fit with who you want to be, what you believe in, what you want for yourself? Because only they can really figure that piece out.
Yeah.
Right. But then they also need to have, like we were talking with technology, the tools too. If we're going to say, okay, so we know that the younger a kid uses, the more likely they are to develop a problem with it, and the worse those problems are likely to be, like more resistant to change, higher relapse rate, all that stuff, right? Bigger chaos. So the end game is really like delaying use as long as possible, right? So if we're going to say, don't use this or don't use this now, this is what I want for you because I love the hell out of you. By the way, that's what we lead all the conversations with. that we're putting in expectations and consequences and, having it because we just love the heck out of our kids, is that, what was I saying? I just lost my train of thought.
You were saying that we need to approach and ask
Right.
them what their
So-
values are.
Right, with their values, but we also have to help them develop that toolbox for how to navigate these situations where the people that they find cool and want to be accepted by are doing the thing, right? Because peer pressure, we have to find out what peer pressure, if we're going to help them, strategize and navigate peer pressure, first we have to ask them, because we're going back to let them school us. We can't assume it's like whatever. I think like the after school specials, that I used to watch, like my generation, and it was always like the guy in the bathroom, all wearing black, and he'd be like, "You want some drugs?" It's like, or that all the people at the party being like, do it, or you're a nerd, or that's not what peer pressure looks like, says every high schooler. But in order to know what your kids' peer pressure look like, you have to ask. And shut up and listen.
Yeah.
We have to shut up and listen a lot with our teens.
Yeah.
And then we can say, okay, so how do you let's strategize, how you're going to handle keeping your cool points on, when the people that you want to be accepted by are doing the thing. Because it's not peer pressure. What I hear over and over is really internal. It's this sense of but if I don't, then this might happen. Or, but I want to be part of the fun. I want to be part of the memories. It makes sense. We can validate that. We can say that totally makes sense that you want to be included in that instead of drugs are bad, you shouldn't do them, or you're a bad Jew, right? So all of that, conversation, and then comes the how do I help you have all those alternatives to this? If you understand the reasons why kids are using and the reason why your kid might have gone there, or that they believe kids are using for, being like, okay, well, so I don't want you to develop well, you asked the question, how do you feel about having something have control over you? Every teen says not okay,
Yeah.
right? That's a great value. That's a great value to use, by the way. Do you really want to be like nicotine's bee, have it control you? No. So, or social medias. Or screens, exactly, right? So how can I help you do that? But I think in order to have those conversations, we have to stay curious without judgment. It's the same tools, right? It's the same tools. And we respect their opinions. We validate their opinions. It doesn't mean we're agreeing with them. When our kid says well, everybody's vaping, it's not a big deal, right? Everybody does that. And then, sorry, I know I imitate teens really well. For the certain teens, sorry, I'm stereotyping. Not you don't talk like that at all. But they do. Some do though, right? Yeah. But is instead of being like, what are you nuts? Are you not hearing? This stuff rots your brain. We want to go into all of those reactive places. And all it takes is one good freak out, I hate to tell you, for them to stop trusting you as a source of support and guidance and information on this stuff. So if we want to be one of their main sources of support and guidance and information, not whoever they're finding on the other side of this, not their other 16-year-old friend, right? And in order to do that, we need to respect, I see why you would feel that way, or where did you hear that from? I'm curious. We just stay curious, validate it, and then we can say, stay calm, regulate, breathe, deep breathe, and then say, well, and that scares me, and here's why. Or, and you can still have your opinion. Or I heard something different on the news. Can I share that with you? Or I heard this story on NPR this morning, or whatever. And we can put ours out. But it's amazing how much more they are likely to respect you when you respect them, and they don't feel as respected as we think they should. When we don't, because we tend to judge and put down and make their stuff wrong and not respect.
And I think the other piece to that is we constantly, from day one all the way, to 35, 40, because we're always going to be their parent, is helping them develop self-awareness. And Dr. Siegel has this quote, if anyone knows Dr. Siegel, I love him. He's got
Dan
this,
the man.
Yes.
Love him.
Total fangirl.
Yeah.
Dan, if you're out there, call me. We can talk great. I hear you. But he has this quote that says, says the state of self-awareness becomes the trait of wisdom.
Mm.
And what, I know, do I need to repeat that?
Yeah.
Yeah, say it again.
We're gonna repeat it.
The state of self-awareness becomes the trait of wisdom. And what we want for our kids, whether it's the screen use or making good choices about drugs, it's wisdom and self-awareness. And Dr. Siegel, damn, if I can claim that, talks about the reward circuitry in the brain. And again, I go back to brain because I love it. And that's really powerful to share with our kids. And we can share that with them without being like, don't do drugs. Just be like, oh my gosh, there's this fascinating thing I just learned about the reward circuitry and how that operates. And then ask them, what do you think that reward circuitry looks like for me? Do you see me have any addictive stuff? Right? Because it can't just be them. It's like, yeah, Mom, at Christmas time, you and your Hallmark movies, gotta slow down. Right? Like we all have our own. I'd like to say it's like dark chocolate and Prosecco, but right now it's the Hallmark movies.
Bad.
That's okay.
No judgment.
Yeah, bad
Just
dating,
good
bad dating
stuff.
shows. Can't
So
stop.
we need to help them differentiate in this building of self-awareness between need and like. And what in that adolescent brain, that is, it overlaps each other. And so telling them a need versus a like, you don't feel like you're missing out, right? So, I have this need, but I'm not going to address it. I've got all these other things going on. Versus a like makes you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm missing something. So starting to build that in them, and he also has an acronym that I love that I started with the girls very young. Now, I don't know how it would land on like 17-year-olds, but for those of you that do have younger kids, you can start and build it up, but it's called SIFT. And it's kind of what you talked about, like what's the S is sensation, I is image, F is feeling, T is thought, right? Because a lot of times, so S is sensation. So what's going on right now in your body we'll use the example more for screens because you're kind of there when they're doing screens versus like, I think I'm gonna vape. So what's going on when they're like, give me my phone back, I need it. So building the self-awareness, what's going on for you? Okay, what's that sensation? What images are coming up? All my friends are gonna be talking about the party and I'm not gonna be there. What feelings are going on? Everyone's gonna talk about it. Sense of belonging, it's our strongest emotional drive. I'm going to be missing out.
Especially as a teen.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
I
yeah.
could care less. I want to be on a mountaintop with like a cat and books.
Right.
For
But-
real.
But yeah.
And chocolate.
But for teens. And then what are your thoughts, right? So then what are the thoughts around that? Well, the thoughts are, if you don't give me my phone back, you're going to ruin my standing in 8th grade and all of this stuff. Okay, great. Right? So just helping them build that self-awareness around it is really powerful in that need versus like. Because a lot of times they say they need that when it's really, I would like that.
I also wonder, just thinking about how you've done, because in the past when I've been able to watch you teach, you've done the hand signal for flipping the lid, where you've got prefrontal cortex. I'm going to try and do it. My balance flip. Prefrontal cortex, midbrain, reptile brain. We're stressed. We flip up that prefrontal cortex. We don't have access to as much rational thought, communication, impulse control. And when I hear you describing a teenager saying they just really want to go to the party, but internally they feel like they need to, and you tell them no, I imagine that their fight or flight response is immediately going to kick in because that sense of belonging is such a strong, compelling need. I mean, it's completely normal and human.
Well, and being left out as a teenager is a survival threat. Your brain registers it as a survival threat.
Yeah.
And what happens with screens and that need to belong and connection, they have that drive because our brains are left over from cave time. And the only reason you're going to survive outside the cave is if you have a strong social network.
Yeah.
So that is a very valid, authentic drive. But what happens is if they're meeting that with technology, it's superficial and it's not being fully met. And so those are those times where they're like, I hear that you are wanting that. Why don't you go to your friends? why don't you call your friend up, right? And those are ways, and that's back to screen, but those are ways that we can limit that screen time and meet. Like I'm hearing you say, you need to talk with your friend. What if you go see them? What if you meet up with them?
What are some other ways you can meet that need?
Yeah, because then also what's happening with screens is we know that empathy is a mirror neuron, meaning our kids are only going to develop empathy by seeing it. They can't read it. They can't text it. They need to see it
And practice it.
it. Yep. And all the nonverbal stuff that comes with it. And so it's really important that we're helping them meet that need of sense of belonging and connection in real time. Yeah, not metaverse. Give me some on metaverse. But
Without
bring us
vaping.
back.
Yeah.
That's a whole different panel discussion. So
And they're
what I'm hearing the both of you say, over and over, really, there's a common thread here, a couple.
Mhm.
Respect the expertise that our teens have
Mhm.
on what's happening in their worldview, and honor that their needs and feelings are valid. The ways that they might be trying to or be actively meeting those needs may be dangerous or unhealthy. But if we can approach them with curiosity, compassion, and respect, and with humility, and without judgment, and no buts, then hopefully we can enter into a dialogue where we can help them develop more awareness about what is working for them, what is not, and build up an inner compass for how to navigate meeting their needs in a way that works for them.
You're like an amazing summarizer.
Yes, she is. She's
Wow.
really good.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
And the thing about just having conversation too, I think it's important to remember that we also want to establish that the family norm that we talk about these things.
Yes.
We talk about screens, we talk about disordered eating, we talk about mental health, we talk about sex, we talk about drugs. I mean, this is just like this, the family norm is that we have these open communication, you know, and so it's not just like, okay, Sunday, 6 o'clock, we're having the drug talk.
Or my mom waiting until we're in the car, moving on the highway,
Well,
so that there was no escape.
And sometimes it's tricky because sometimes the car can be a good place. Because I think one of those rules, like it's that like, you know, it's better to have 61-minute conversations versus 160-minute conversation, right? About all these things. But I think it's about like when you've established it as a norm, it's not a big deal. This is just what we do. And it's woven in organically to all the things. So when there is the Super Bowl ad on, there's the bulletin board, there's the, you know, the story about the person, the celebrity that just went to rehab. There's no shortage of opportunities to talk about screen health and to talk about mental health because they're all woven in, and to talk about substances, right? So just, you know, being able to bounce that off and be like, wow, that really strikes me for this reason. Like, what do you think about that? And then you don't have to just, and then keep on going, right? So under 5 minutes when you're not looking at each other. It's a great rule for the conversations about the tough things with teenagers, you know? So it's like, you're walking the dog, you're baking, you're fixing the car, you're shooting baskets, you know? And it's just sort of like, you know, hey, how do you feel about this thing? Or I'm hearing about this. God, that freaks me out.
Which
You know, are you seeing this with your friends?
Which reduces the emotional charge
Absolutely.
on your end, which
Right.
reduces the reactivity potentially on their end, and then it doesn't bounce back and forth.
Yeah. So sometimes the car can be good if
Yeah.
you're kind of dipping through and you got some music on in the background. But if it's going to be a big, intense, heavy thing, and they're like,
We're like duct taped
and
to
you,
the back.
right, yeah, you see the kid being like, okay, I've seen that in the movies where you can like jump and roll. Like, how can I jump and roll?
No, let me bring it
And
back.
not be hurt.
The other thing that the both of you said, I think, that I want to highlight is inviting our kids to have a dialogue with us and humanizing that addiction is a human tendency that we all have.
Mhm.
And I'm addicted to my phone.
Right.
And I'm working on that right now.
Yeah.
And I think as adults, we're all navigating our relationships to screens and to drugs, whether that's chocolate or, you know, like we're all navigating our own coping mechanisms as well. And
We all
so-
want to feel good
Yes.
and not feel good, not feel distressed, right?
Yeah.
Right. And we do things to either feel something or not feel something. We can all relate to that. And so even no matter what addictive thing our kid is doing, I think, you know, approaching them with that, like the empathy piece, you know, I get that because I do this, you know, because the other thing with teenagers is that hypocrisy meter is really high.
Yeah.
So you can't, you know, if you're going to ask of something or bring something to their attention that you do anything like, you need to open up with, boo, I know I do this too. Or like, and I don't want you to develop this thing that I have. You know, I've got this habit because I started it as a teenager when my brain was wiring everything it did. Hardwiring, you know?
I want to
So-
jump in real quick. I'm
Do
sorry to
it.
interrupt you.
No, it's
And in our last few minutes, use this as a segue for the last question
Mhm.
we have for this evening, which is how do we avoid power struggles with our teens and kids as social, I mean, as we've been talking, the both of you have referenced how social norms, and we all know how social norms have changed for screens and for drugs. So considering that, how, and it's not clear what is healthy and unhealthy, how do we avoid power struggles when we try and open up these dialogues?
Yeah, I feel like it's the red thread that's
Yeah.
carried us through all of this. And so I think like there's techniques that we can use when it does get heated, but everything that you've summarized so beautifully are ways to prevent that power struggle. And in addition to that, timing is everything when we have our conversation with our kid, right? Like we're not going to be like, oh, I know you're really tired and sleep deprived and you have a big test and all that, but I think this is a great time to talk about this news thing I heard on vaping.
Yes.
So, right, like so that's also going to help lessen the power struggles is when we're choosing that time. And I think handing back, right? We want to develop solution-focused kids.
Mhm.
So handing back the problems.
Mhm.
If there's something that needs to be addressed, if trust has been violated, if you have found paraphernalia or, you know, they snuck their phone and all that was happening, instead of saying, so this is what we're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. Say, hey, this is what's going on for me. I trusted you, you know, our family culture, our family value, phones go to bed at 10, you snuck it out. How are you going to win my trust back?
Mhm.
What ideas do you have to make this right? And get their ideas and hear what they have to say. One, it's building that muscle of problem solving for them. And it's also great for us because part of parenting that's so exhausting is coming up with that stuff. So if we can be the ones that are like, oh, I'm going to sit back here, think about Dr. Siegel and eat chocolate while you figure out this trust issue with sneaking your phone. But really, sincerely, we can hand that stuff back to them. It does not have to fall on us.
Yep.
They are amazing with the solutions that they can come up with.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. I mean, I think it's about being cooperative, you know, and finding those common, being like, well, this is the mutual goals that you have here. Being like, we all want the same thing. We want for you to be, you know, healthy, safe, thriving out in the world. We want for you to have increasing freedom and independence. We all want the same thing, right? So there's this, we have this mutual goal, you know, so how do we get there? You know, along with, you know, we also are seeking mutual trust. I mean, I think we tend to, as parents, to be like, what's it, you know, like, how do I trust you? What do I need to do so that you trust me? So that you trust me to have open conversations about these tough things and to share your inner world and your outer world with me. Because if that's the magic right there. When they share their inner and outer world with us, then we can help them, guide them through. You know, we can be the lighthouse, you know, for them through that. So I think it's just about, you know, just building what you're saying. It's about, you know, this isn't like we're just laying down all of the expectations, all of the rules. I mean, I think, and for those of you who have younger kids, you know, it is laying out sort of what these are the family expectations and the guidelines and the ifs, then we're going to do the, you know, like about screens and about drugs before you get there, you know, when they're in early stages. So I love I'm a big fan of phone agreements, like written phone agreements that everybody sits down. I don't know where you stand with that, but I love those where you sit down and come up with the things about, like, you know, what does this mean about how you're going to behave online and what you're not going to do and are going to do, and sort of having it in a written thing so that it's just in the drawer and you can pull it out and be like, okay, so let's just check in on it. And you celebrate when they're like, you're rocking this. Thank you. This makes this really easy for me. Because now I don't have to use my time and energy going all po-po on you, you know, and getting like being an FBI agent and a you know, prison guard. Because that's exhausting to me to do at all with any of the things. So I don't want to do that. So, thank you for rocking this. And you celebrate when they are, don't just wait until they screw it up. Celebrate when they're not, because it's really huge that you commend that even when you catch them doing the thing on the screen, or you catch them vaping or doing the thing, they have had 1,001 other opportunities to do that they haven't taken. And kids tell me that every day, like, oh my God, there's other kids that are doing this so much more. I could have done this in the bathroom. I could have skipped class. I could have watched the porn on the bus. but I didn't, and my parent doesn't realize what it is to navigate through this world, so we got to make sure that we're commending that, as well as part of, but I'm flying off, but it's all part of that. But it's all part of the, I think, avoiding the power struggles. Is that if we have earned their respect, if they do see that we're on the same page with them, if we are looking at shared goals, and they do see that we are trying to earn their trust too, and that we're checking in with them about like, hey, like, I feel like you're not, I'd love for you to be talking to me about this more, or that you're talking to me less, like what's going on and what do I need to do differently so that you feel safer with me to do that,
Yeah, it's all about relationship.
Yeah.
And building a relationship where our kids can trust us as a safe place to come to, or a safe person to come to talk about these things, inner world, outer world, and then having dialogue with respect, supporting them and figuring out what works for them, helping them to then make plans and make decisions moving forward. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And we're also going to have less power struggles if we give them a little bit of room. It's different when it's life or death stuff. That's a different, we're going to get a little bit more controlling, and we're going to be their frontal lobe for them. And we're going to, do the supervision and monitoring and all those things. But when it's like, what? So here's what feels important is that you get 8 hours of sleep, because yada, 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 all the brain science and all the things. Right. And so like, I don't want to pull the phone from you every night or control, or I could put the controls on it so that it shuts off after you've been on it for 2 hours. I could do that, and I will if I need to, but I want to let me just let's see if you can do this for yourself first, and then you're monitoring it, but see if they can first before you go in with the Uber control. That I find that to reduce the power struggles, because sometimes it's like just holding on to that. Oh, look at this. I'm trusted. I'm believed in. I'm being respected to do this, instead of going the other way around.
Naming the problem and then handing the
Give 'em a
problem
little
back to the kid.
Right. And then you're like, so, and if that's hard for you to do, then I'll step in a little bit more. But I know that neither of us want that. So I'm hoping that you will, but I'm here to help if you're struggling yourself.
Collaboration.
Yeah.
Collaboration, and then just the consistency and continuity of our behavior. Nothing sets off a power struggle when we're like, you really should be off your phone. Right. And when the girls were little, that was so important to me. And so every time they came in, even if I was on my phone for work, I would over accentuate and say, I'm going to set this down, because the most important thing is this right now.
Yeah.
And now that, they're 12 on the brink of 13, they're really good at recognizing that. So even if you're having to like call it out, like I'm closing this down right now, because the most important thing. So that also will lessen power struggles if they see us walking the talk.
I feel like we could keep going for another 12 hours.
We're doing intensive.
Because I love
intensive
talking
next
to you guys,
weekend.
And this topic is just really rich, and there's a lot. And we're at a little over our time. So I want to respect everybody's evenings and say thank you so much.
Yeah,
for taking
thank
the time
you.
to do this. So thank you all for coming out tonight. We're gonna end. This is the awkward. Are we ending the live stream now?
And goodbye.
Okay.
Good night.